Hello, everybody. Everyone there in the chat? Hello. Oh, great. And we have Craig Bartlett here, too. How are you? Oh, I think you're still muted.
To unmute.
There we go. Perfect.
Hi, Nico. It's good to see you.
Hello. Good to see you amidst all this, virtually see you amidst all this pandemic craziness.
and the city's in flames.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not, but smoke everywhere.
Oh, thankfully, you're slightly out of the smoke. You're down by the beach.
Yeah. I'm on Catalina Island, so this is different.
How long are you there for?
I'm coming back tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
So
awesome. Well, everybody, I don't think he needs any introduction, but Craig, creator of Hey Arnold, and Penny from Pee-wee's Playhouse, and what else? The Noid, correct? Or
Noid.
Designer of? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I animated some Noids. Yeah. I can't take credit for that. I won't take credit for that.
And yeah, tell us a little bit about what you're working on these days. And
well, I did Dinosaur Train now for PBS for more than 10 years. It was in September 2009 that it premiered. So it's been around for at least 12 years. And we finished season 5. That's 100 episodes, which catches me up to the total I have with Arnold too.
Cool.
And we also made a movie, which, sorry, they seem to be drilling or sawing outside. I
also hope my cats don't make too much noise.
That'll be fine. It's always cool when pets making a sudden appearance. We also made a Dinosaur Train movie for Universal, which I just put through post in July and delivered it in August. Really cool to make a feature that we had to finish all the animation through the COVID.
Oh, wow.
And it was really cool because of how everybody, just pulled together and got it done. And we did all of our posts remotely like this, doing Zoom. And the only thing I came in for was the mix, which was a thrill because I hadn't gone into an office for like 4 or 5 months.
Oh yeah.
And it was a thrill to go and sit in there and listen to the show. So I'm really happy about the movie. It'll come out probably the beginning of 2021. PBS will show it, and Universal will stream it. And so I can't wait. People who you kind of have to have little ones around to know about Dinosaur Train, but in the preschool set, they will love it. It's a really good movie. I love it.
Great.
Modestly.
I love how, and we're going to see even more animation in 2021, but I just love how, despite the pandemic, animation is going as strong as ever. And
no kidding.
I love that we can still do that.
Yeah, and you can see all the streamers that pay for the animation are having, it's great for them. So it's even a time to like aggressively develop and make new animations. So we're really lucky.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the industry? And
yeah, I've been working for so damn long that the world that I started in is so long ago that it's like in the mythical past. Like imagine working for Will Vinton in the 80s on claymation. That was my first job out of college. I graduated from the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, where I'm from. I'm from Seattle originally. And I came down to Portland. The only game in town was Will Vinton's claymation studio, and it was almost the only game in the whole Northwest. And so I got my start in Portland doing claymation for this weird little shop, completely outside of the Hollywood animation industry. Yeah. But it was so long ago that industry almost didn't exist yet. When I started working for Will, that would have been the kind of the all-time bottom of LA animation. There was nothing really very good made in the 80s, and except Pee-wee's Playhouse came in '86. And I remember even when I was up in Portland working for Will, when Pee-wee's Playhouse came on CBS, it blew our minds. There was like a little cult of us that worked for Will. Who were like, we'd come in on Monday and go, "Did you see Pee-wee?" And we would talk about it because it was so crazy and so psychedelic. and the all the different kinds of animation, indie animation that were on that show. There'd be the stop motion dinosaurs that lived in the mouse hole.
Yeah, the dinosaur family.
Remember the ant farm that was made out of cutout paper?
Yeah. Oh god, and the mixed media on that show is
and even the king of cartoons would come in and he'd have an old 16 millimeter projector and he'd show an old weirdo cartoon from the 30s. And I was like, oh my God, I literally went, I've got to, wherever this is, I got to go find this and work for these people. I was totally ready to bail on Portland, and Portland, a groovy, what a cool scene. It was such a great place to live. When I first worked for Will, I thought I'd maybe be there forever. But by the time, the late 80s came in Pee-wee, I was like, I got to go find that shit. I got to do that. So I moved in 87. I got to work starting from the second season on.
Cool.
The show in season 2, they moved the show from New York to LA. And so it was perfect. And Prudence Fenton, who was the producer of the animation, called me up in Portland and said, do you want to come down and direct Penny cartoons? I was like, hell yeah, of course I'd love it.
I love Penny.
Direct the Penny cartoon. So that was the start of everything, really. I mean, I don't want to discredit Vinton's studio for teaching me all the kind of filmmaking background that I got there and learned how to animate there. Yeah. But it was really, my career took off because I came to LA. I went to work on Pee-wee, and then I met the people from Klasky Csupo and was story editor on season 1 of Rugrats. And then I met all the Nick people.
I love the Rugrats posts you've been making on Instagram lately.
Yeah, thank you. I know. I've been, those of you that my Instagram handle is Craig Bartlett. So check it out. I just realized that in August, it was the 30-year anniversary of when I came to Klasky Csupo to work on Rugrats.
Congrats.
And I was like, oh my God, we started. And it's kind of cool since obviously the new Rugrats reboot is going to come out. It'll be cool. It'll be like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It was actually interesting to see when the show premiered, but we started in August of 90.
So it'll be 30 years anniversary of the show coming out. Yeah. Wow. Next year.
It makes great sense for them to do that. I mean, it's just a number, but still, that's kind of a cool thing to wrap your head around. The people who follow me, they're like, 30 years. Oh my God, I'm old.
and then you started Hey Arnold with stop motion as well.
Yeah, when I moved to LA in 87. No, actually I moved here for good in 88. And I was working on season 3 of Pee-wee. That was a pretty short season. We were done pretty quick. And I was like, okay, now I'm unemployed. I live in LA. I'm renting a place in Los Feliz and I'm unemployed. What am I going to do? So that I built a stand, an animation stand that was the same principle as the Penny stand, where it's a 35 millimeter camera, down shooter, shooting down onto a plate of glass where you've got your clay figures, but they're I called it 2.5D because they're not standing up. They're not armatured, wire figures that you're walking around. They're lying on their back. So it's great, actually. It's kind of no gravity. Penny could kind of hop up and down and fly around. And I always like to say it was like a puppet show. You've got a background a couple feet below the glass that's just a flat, usually I just have paper that I colored and stuff, and I'd slide that stuff in and out, just like in a puppet show when they put a new backdrop down behind the puppets. So any kind of story you could tell in a puppet show would be effective for that medium, And so there I was. Penny was done again. I was. Those would only last for numbers of weeks, and then we'd be cut loose for another year.
Oh wow. Okay.
So I'm unemployed, and I thought I'll just create my own character, and so I decided to do it in clay. I made the Arnold short, the first Arnold short, Arnold Escapes from Church.
Yes.
In clay, just like Penny. And I made I think it was a 2-minute short. It seemed like a perfect amount to kind of bite off, try to do a 2-minute cartoon. And the other thing that really helped me was I got those early claymation Arnold shorts in those tourneys of animation. Do you know what those are? Those were in the late 80s, kind of all through the 80s. They would gather like a feature-length collection of independent shorts from all around the world and show them theatrically, just go from town to town. Like rent out one theater and show the tournée of animation. So I was thrilled because I was, an art student in Portland when I first saw the tourneys. I was like, damn, man, I got to do that. Instead of being a painter, or a sculptor. I want to be an animator because they're little stories and they're funny. You know, it much better suited my personality to focus on storytelling rather than, you know, fine art goals, whatever those are.
When I first saw those Arnold stop motion shorts, what always struck me was just the shape of everyone's head and how well their silhouettes all are you know, how they all complement each other, just by how different each character has their own shape and clear silhouette. I always loved that.
I started with Arnold, and the people ask, you know, why the football head? It was exactly because I was still working in clay when I started with Arnold, and we would just pour out like flesh-colored clay on a big sheet on a table onto a piece of like wax paper, and then you'd have this clay that was only about this thick, and you could take a knife and just cut shapes out. Yeah. And that's how we'd start. And then since they weren't truly 3D and they were really kind of 2.5D, we would just make a kind of a low relief, you know, head shape. And that's how we did Penny. And so when I made Arnold, I just made that really wide head and put the eyes out on the sides and all that crazy hair. And I thought, oh, that's freaky. That'll make a really good silhouette. And you'll be able to tell it's Arnold even if he's really small, you know?
Yeah.
And Gerald, you know, tall and thin, and Arnold short and wide, so that they complemented each other as
great compliment. You know,
two friends. Helga, the giant, you know, pigtails. It's funny too, because when I posted that stuff about Rugrats, people were like, and then a couple of years later, you made Helga. But the truth was, Helga was really designed in '88 when I made Arnold Escapes from Church. So she actually precedes Angelica by 2 years. Just a technicality.
Yeah. And how many stop motion Arnold shorts were there?
There were 3. Arnold Escapes from Church, the Arnold Waltz, which is based on a 4th grade recital of the Skaters Waltz, and Arnold Rides a Chair, which I made for Sesame Street. And that was, even by then, by 1990, Sesame Street reached out to me, somebody who produced for them, Arlene Sherman. And she said, hey, you know, we've seen your Arnold shorts. Do you want to make an Arnold short for Sesame Street? And don't worry, you don't have to worry about your rights. You know, you retain the rights to Arnold, but we'd love to have an Arnold short. And
that's so cool.
I was thrilled, man.
Yeah.
Those little jobs completely saved my ass, man. That paid the rent. I was really kind of hand to mouth in those early days in LA. So I was thrilled. And, you know, right after that, after I made the little Arnold short for Sesame Street, Paul Germain, one of the creators of Rugrats, reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to come and be our story editor on this new show? And that, you know, Nickelodeon had just picked it up for an order of 13 half hours. And then that saved my ass. And I had that job for, you know, 1.5 years or 2 years, I think. But not even that much, maybe, before I'd started doing something else. But those jobs were key, you know. Each one of them, if I hadn't gotten the next job, you know, I don't know what I would have done. So.
That's so great to hear that, like, Arnold was really there just during, you know, your whole travel to LA.
True, right? The Arnold I had that little Arnold short to show Gabor Chupo and Arlene Klasky too. And you know, the question was kind of like, wow, why did they even take a chance on me and let me start as a story editor for them when I didn't really have any screenwriting experience? And I think it was because they could look at that little film and go, oh, okay, this guy's interesting.
But when you were developing and pitching Arnold to be a Nicktoon series eventually, did you pitch it at first to be stop motion, or was it always going to be 2D?
No, the meeting I had with Mary Harrington, she was then exec in charge of all the LA, you know, they basically, New York Nickelodeon sent Mary out to LA and said, rent some space and start making cartoons out there. You know, you tap into the talent pool in LA. And so Mary asked me, I came in and showed her that Arnold Escapes from Church short, and she loved it. But she said, would you want this to be a stop motion show? I said, probably not really. And I had some Arnold comics I had done by then. So I had these little color 2D comics that I had done for Simpsons Illustrated. They were like little 8-panel, like Sunday Funnies, you know, color comics. And that she saw those, and she saw one drawing in particular that she really thought was hysterical. And was like, that's what I want. I want that shit.
Okay, cool.
And so I was like, I'm glad you feel that way, because I think it would be obviously much easier to do as a 2D cartoon than to do a stop motion cartoon series. And, you know, since then they've managed to do it. There's a lot of stop motion going on out there now. But at that time, there kind of was nothing. In LA, there was kind of, the Kyoto brothers were doing stop motion. That was about it.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad, you know, that going 2D for Hey Arnold was a really good idea.
Cool. And I mean, yeah, we all love Arnold, and it was great that he got to come back for the Jungle movie.
Yeah, thank you.
After so much time.
Yeah.
Do we want to jump into questions? It seems like everybody's the chat seems to be questions are kind of
yeah, go ahead.
So let's
question away, man.
Let's get to it. Ayost, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ayost. My main question for Craig is just to ask him what's next. What's he working on next?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm
whatever you can talk about.
Yeah, I'm trying to sell a couple. I've got a couple of ideas that I'm trying to sell as you know, new properties, new cartoon shows, and one I'm trying to make for PBS, because I've had a 12-year relationship. Well, actually, I've started working with Linda Semensky at PBS when she worked for Nick. She was around when I developed Hey Arnold in the early 90s.
Cool.
So I've known Linda, and I've known Linda since Rugrats. So that's another person that I've worked with for 30 years.
Good relationship.
And so we have a really good relationship, and I that's sort of ongoing, where I would love to make another series for them. And I have an idea that I've been developing with them, and I'm trying to make that go. And another one, there's a couple of these ideas that I've developed in the last couple of years, where I was doing my development. I was trying to do it with, you know, drawing on sketchbooks, you know, and like, let me show you an example. I'll just do I don't know how well you can see that, but I'll just do, just drawings really from my unconscious, and I'm trying to just start going and filling up a couple of pages and just see what I'm interested in. And I actually even did to develop my ideas for this, I did a really exhaustive cataloging of all my favorite things to doodle. And I looked through 10 years of doodles and was like, okay, I like to doodle hamburgers. I like to doodle octopi. I like to doodle sailing ships. I like to doodle flying saucers. I like to doodle Saturns, and so on. And I just filled pages with these. And then I looked at them all and kind of picked out my favorite stuff. And I realized there was definitely a water theme. And so I am trying to develop a sort of Age of Sail show about a girl who's the granddaughter of some pirates. And so
cool.
It's just something these are both pet projects that are based on what I like best, what's most fun for me to draw. And, we'll see where these go. Meanwhile, the other thing that's really on the horizon is probably more Dinosaur Train. I mean, I can't get too far ahead of myself, because we need, everybody needs things to kind of settle down before we can start our next season. But I would love to do more seasons of Dinosaur Train. And I hope that Universal's really happy with the new movie and orders more for them too, because the long form is always really fun too. So that would happen. People always ask, hey, where's season 6 of Hey Arnold?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's next fall, right?
This is what when I made the Jungle movie, it was really cool because I was invited back to Nickelodeon. I got to gather people from the original crew, and also a bunch of people that were, next generation people that were working for Nick, who had grown up on the show. So that was super fun. It was co-directed by Rami Muskies, who worked on the journal with me at the end of Hey Arnold, and Stu Livingston, who was a kid who grew up on Hey Arnold. Yep. So that was super. It was a real kick for Stu to bring his vast, fanness of Hey Arnold and his encyclopedic knowledge of it, man. I really was impressed with Stu, man. He knew everything.
Yeah, I love
Also,
Stu.
The people who helped us put the script together, we put together a team of people that were, like across 2 generations.
Mhm.
And the next generation people, they knew all the jokes and knew all the characters. Since we're talking about character,
Yeah.
They loved the Arnold characters and knew them really well. So that was really fun. And I said to Nickelodeon, I said, look at this, man. We've assembled this killer crew. We have completely redone all the assets because now it's high def and 9:16 and everything's digital in ways that we weren't before. Redesigned all the characters on purpose to make it be kind of 2 years later.
Okay.
They're going into 6th grade at the end of the Jungle movie, and they were in 4th grade in the original series. So my point was, see, it's all set, now we can just start season 6 where they're going into 6th grade and all the things that were fun about bringing these characters back. And again, I'm talking about characters, like, just think about it. What will happen? What will be going on with Rhonda? What's going to happen with Sid and Stinky? What's happened to Harold? Who's hooking up, the various kind of like relationship things, who's hooking up with who.
Yeah.
And, I said, hey, whenever you guys are ready, so am I. But so far, nothing from Nick. We made like a soundtrack album. We made a vinyl release.
That was really cool.
In July. And things like that. I'm always trying to. The sketchbook stuff that I have been posting during the coronavirus. I tried to kind of like make a whole like Corona. Letters between Arnold and Helga online.
I love those. It's
Thank
so
you.
cute. Everyone follow Craig on Instagram if you aren't.
Yeah, if you start April 15 is when the letters between Arnold and Helga start. So all you have to do is go to my Instagram feed and roll back to April 15 and you can just read them all. But I actually told someone at Nick in publishing that it would be a really cool opportunity for me to do some kind of book of that. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm hoping something like that happens. Anything I can do. It's obviously the series that is the most beloved of anything I've ever done. And, I worked on it kind of longer than anything else. More years were spent doing that. And so I'd be happy to do more. And I think one of the real benefits, talking about characters again, one of the real benefits is we had 100 half hours of Hey Arnold, and those characters got deeply developed. Many side characters got 4 or 5 episodes that were about them. And so it kind of, to me, they seem really kind of alive to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of the characters, I feel like I know them better than, my neighbors.
Sure. And I'm kind of just rolling off into my own questions here. When did you find that you were developing a lot of the characters as the show was going on, or did you have a lot of it? Did you have a lot of it figured out beforehand? Or
not at all? I mean, it's funny. Like when I think about it, like all the years since then, I think, wow, wouldn't that be cool to actually sit down with somebody, say Netflix, and say, hey, Netflix, I want to make 50 half hours of something, or even less. Like I want to make a 10 half hour, like little kind of mini series. And you go, it'll start like this, and it'll arc like that, and at the end, this will happen. But when we made Hey Arnold, we got picked up to go to series, and all I had were those little shorts I had made. And there were, if you look at that original Arnold pilot that I made to sell this series, you meet Arnold, Gerald, Helga, Harold, and that's kind of it. You meet Grandma and Grandpa. I think that's about it. And so you don't have that much to go on. And so when we went to series, the sky's the limit. It's like, let's one by one keep throwing these other characters into the stories, see what works, kind of find out who you like. That includes actors like the kid Adam Wiley, who played Curly. He was so hilarious. I was like, geez, Curly, man, this guy's like a bomb that's going to go off. We should do one where Curly snaps, and so on.
Yeah.
And so, based on the strengths of the actors who play them, obviously Helga, Francesca Smith, who played Helga, was so brilliant that we started writing for Helga immediately. And the women who wrote for this show wanted to write Helga stories. Men who wrote for the show wanted to write Helga stories. She was easily the most attractive character to write for because you can have her do anything, and she's so funny and kind of goes nuts and
so appealing, just naturally appealing.
So violent, charismatic.
This next question is a good segue into what we're talking about. From LJ, a question for Craig. What is, I'm going to say, besides Arnold, you could say Arnold, but besides Arnold, what is one character you're most proud to have created, and why? Their personality, story arc, traits, etc.
Wow, that's a great question. And it would be Arnold is my favorite because he's sort of my avatar, the one I identify with. But Helga is the next one for me that I'm most proud of, just because of the impression she's made. When people tell me that they were a Helga when they were a kid, or are a Helga still.
Yeah.
and just kind of the range of things that have happened, and so I'm really glad about Helga. I also really like Grandma and Grandpa. They are very made up characters too. Like my real grandparents didn't really resemble. My maternal grandma Nanny was pretty grandma in some ways, but still all that kind of hilarious dementia and the kind of play acting that she does. Where she's like, oh no, another character. That's all complete fantasy and made up to make an entertaining cartoon. So like the kind of, and the amount of kind of funny invention that happened with the Grandma and Grandpa characters, I'm also pretty proud of.
It seems like a lot of characters can get developed just from people in real life. You said that Arnold's grandparents are a lot like yours.
Yeah, they are and they aren't, but definitely to be inspired by real life. And I would say too, this is something I would say to all people who want to create their own characters and create their own show. If you say, this is, well, I said Arnold is not me exactly at all, but I identify with Arnold because that's the way I felt as a kid, the way I felt about childhood. And so when you say that, it really helps when you're trying to sell your show, you're trying to, pitch that first story and then so on. In season 1, when there was a lot of push and pull, a lot of fighting going on, there was a tremendous amount of just, it was kind of stressful getting that thing off the ground. I could say, hey man, that happened to me, talking about a story where they're like, well, that doesn't seem plausible, or that, that's kind of ridiculous. I'd say, hey man, it actually happened. And so it really is good to have that kind of identity with a main character, and to defend it. It really gives you that opportunity to defend it and say, well, it's that way because that's what it was like when I was a kid.
Did you know a Helga growing up?
Well, not really. I mean, Helga is totally the amalgam of all the girls that I liked or that liked me, and we didn't, like unrequited. The one of the things that really struck me when I was a kid and realizing that somebody could be really kind of cruel to you just because that just meant she was really interested in you, and I thought, well, that's weird. Why is she so mean to me? Oh, she likes me. That was kind of a revelation when I was a kid, but nobody in no specific girl.
Gotcha. Question number 3 segues great into what we're talking about here from Jenna. How do you develop or discover the flaws in the characters that you create?
What a great question, because it is the flaws.
Yeah. Helga's lots of flaws, but that's her.
Yeah, and that's like the question you ask yourself. You're like, okay, I've got to make this character more real. That simply, like Harold. Harold as a bully. He was a bully from the very start. The pilot episode, he was gonna kill Arnold. For beating him with the baseball. And Helga says, wait, give him 24 hours to dangle, and then and I'll keep an eye on him, so she can just kind of do her obsessive thing, and it kind of sets everything up. But we were like, okay, we're going to make a series now. We get to make 40 stories in our first order in 20 half hours. What can we do where Harold isn't just like a one-dimensional bully? You know, what else can happen? And so you start thinking about those flaws, like he's actually really sensitive, you know, and he's got a kind of a secret, affectionate side. Harold's kitty, where he adopts that little kitten and he's obsessed with the kitty and would do anything for the kitty. And you're like, oh, I'm starting to like this guy.
Yeah.
And so that's actually Harold's character flaw is actually, it's actually what makes you like Harold. It lets you in. Mm-hmm. It's the very same thing with Helga. Helga, she's just a big bully and really mean and brittle and kind of cruel to everyone. And then we thought, well, we'll go home with Helga and meet her parents. And her dad, Big Bob, is like a huge bully himself and really aggressive and loud and pushy. And you go, oh, this is where Helga learned to be that way. And so her flaws are, she's got a bunch of them. One is like, well, hell, why don't you just tell everybody you like Arnold and be done with it? And she's like, no, that would be impossible. I can't be that vulnerable, you know. I'd become a laughing stock. And she'll kind of go off on some scenario where it's not even like, Helga, it's really not that bad. Just relax. But her flaw is that she could never reveal that. You know, she's proud or she's too afraid and so and once you've dramatized that in a couple of episodes, man, interest in the character goes way up. You know, we knew, it's so funny when the show came out in 96 to kids, you know, age 6 to 11, it was hard to know what people thought of it because it wasn't like people could go on Instagram and go.
Sure.
It was you know, the online, you know, nick.com and his little online message board and all that stuff was in its infancy. Yeah. And also, you know, a 9-year-old wants to write about how they feel about Hey Arnold. That's really different from, say, a 30-year-old wants to write about how they feel about Hey Arnold. A 9-year-old might write you like a 3-line telegram all in caps, like, where are Arnold's parents?
Yeah.
Why is Helga mean?
Why is Helga mean?
You know, what's his last name? Those were the kind of, you know, I get those like giant font all in caps.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, long way to say, you develop those flaws by you think about it. Like they act like this. What if there was really a secret reason they act like that? What if what they're not showing us is like can become the backstory and kind of the subtext for what they're doing. And so I always look for subtext when I'm writing anything.
Great. And I've heard you mention that, you know, if there were to be another season of Hey Arnold, now Arnold and Helga are together, that creates a whole new set of flaws and problems and craziness.
You know that it was such a weird opportunity. We'd made the series up until that episode, The Journal, which ended in a cliffhanger, and we made that in 2001. And it went on TV probably 2003 or 4. But that episode ends in this cliffhanger where they found a map and he's in his dad's journal and he's going to go to San Lorenzo and find his missing parents. But also, in each of the movies, the first one where he saves the neighborhood, that came out in 2002, and then the Jungle movie, each one of those we thought, how can we move that Helga Arnold thing further down the field? Mm-hmm. So the first movie, she confesses to him right to his face and tells him in a huge operatic scene that she loves him and has always loved him. And he's like so weirded out, he almost can't handle it. He can't process it. And but we got to save the neighborhood anyway. Like, it's almost 7 a.m. You know, we got to go. So they agree to kind of like put it behind him. Like, well, that didn't really happen, and, which is funny. But you go, oh, okay. So she runs off happy. You know, like 5 more minutes, she's going to stop and go, hey, wait a minute. I don't know how he feels. You know, and to be really mad. And so we wrote it that way, where Helga is back to abusing him again because he didn't tell her how he felt back. And so all of her flaws come to the fore, and she's meaner even than ever, you know? And so the Jungle movie picks it up there. You know, they've had about a year to stew on that. And now, you know, things are as brittle as they've ever been. And at the end of the movie, he's told her how he feels back because of all the adventure they've gone on. And now he realizes that she's done all this for her or for him and made all these sacrifices for him. And he realizes that he loves her. Then the very last scene, I was trying to make it, you know, really like have a great arc and kind of the first scenes mirror the ending scenes. And you see them come to that corner where you saw at the beginning of the movie, and instead of crashing into each other, the four of them greet each other. Gerald takes Phoebe's hand and they walk off together holding hands off to 6th grade. Arnold tries to take Helga's hand, and you see her kind of melt for a second, and then she whips her hand away and goes, "Hey, who said you could touch me?" So you go, and then she walks off ahead of him, smiling, and you go, "Oh, okay, great. Helga has it just the way she wants it. Arnold loves her. That must be a real thrill for her. She must just wake up every day happy as hell because Arnold loves her, but she's not going to give him the satisfaction. She's going to I'm going to set the terms for this thing. You're going to be, you're going to love me, and I'll let you know how I feel about you." So it was fun for me. I thought, this is cool. She's so complex that she's going to still make it, her way.
Yeah.
And I would imagine when they got to school, she'd still be in denial and abuse him whenever she wanted. And why not? They're only, what are they now? Like 11 or something? It's not like they're even teenagers. So it's very early in they've got a lot of life ahead of them. And I always said they were soulmates. We did an episode in season 5 called Married, which showed them in a couple of different scenarios as adults. And, the point of it was even like, see, they're meant for each other.
Yeah.
These two will live, they'll have like a long and interesting life together because, Helga's epic.
Yeah. I really hope we can see more.
Yeah. I mean, I try to meditate on that happening once in a while. I would love it. And the thing I can do in the meantime is things like I did on my Instagram where I took it to the here and now. I was like, it was funny. When the lockdown happened and we were all sitting at home, all the artists just did a bunch of art. Remember?
Yeah.
Like, there was a frenzy of like drawing and painting and like, I'm gonna learn something new. and so I was trying to do posts that I just trying to do posts, and I knew that Arnold's room was like this wonderful sanctuary that I thought, this would be a cool place to spend the quarantine, Arnold's room.
Yeah, yeah.
I posted and people, they loved it. People really enjoyed those posts. And so it just seemed like a natural progression. I had Arnold send her a letter. Like, what if Arnold wrote like a snail mail, letter and gave it to Harvey and Harvey delivered it.
Yeah.
And it was really fun idea. People really responded to it. So
are you still doing the back and forth?
I tried to get it to a logical, it's this one. I tried to get it to this logical conclusion where they go to Slosson's and they have their ice cream.
That's
and
so
then
great.
this is on the inside when they're looking out at the window and everybody in the entire cast is looking in on them.
I love that.
I think it says, "Criminy, what happened to social distancing?"
Criminy.
So I kind of took it to its logical conclusion, and I thought, we'll see what happens next. The truth was, do you remember in June the restaurants opened back up again?
Yeah.
Then the COVID spiked again, and they closed everything up again. And so I was like, geez, this is so ridiculous. Our reality is so like a freaking roller coaster.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Take a break from any narrative until I can think of something that, relates to this insane world we're living in.
A question from Gustavo. What do you think is essential for your characters regarding character development? What is essential for your characters?
Consistency. Like when you see characters on a show you like, and like you go, okay, these are the rules. This is how they think. And then you see an episode where they get way out of character and it doesn't make sense anymore. You go, well, that just kind of wrecked my ability to believe in this character. Somebody else wrote one where they did something that seems really out of character, and you think, I want to believe in them so I can kind of invest in them emotionally and be entertained by their stories. So they have to be consistent. And you can do a thing, you could have it where for years they behave one way and then they surprise you by getting out of it. But you can't do it on the second or third episode. You got to you kind of build up to that. So I just say, they need to feel real. And the way you can make them feel real is to try to be consistent and be true.
For those folks in the chat, is everyone here, pretty creative? Or are you all like working on your own characters or projects or animations? Or I kind of assume that most people are. Okay, yeah, looks like a lot of people are.
Yeah.
Okay, great, cool. I'm always like, I really hope this is helpful for people.
Yeah. Excuse me a sec. I'm going to open the door.
Sure.
A little warm here in Catalina.
Oh yeah. Okay. Next question. I have trouble writing characters outside of just a couple personality types. How do you write a character that's nothing like you?
That's a cool question. How do you write a character that's nothing like you? Part of it is, I think, we as people who create stuff, we get a kick out of vicariously living through people who aren't like us at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like, I guess I have a little tendency to be like Helga, but not really. First of all, she's a girl, and so already you're thinking outside the box if you're writing female characters as a guy, and the same thing if you're a girl writing guy characters and so on. It's like you think about all those things that you aren't, and think, what would it be like? And so, especially, I think it's great when you've got a show that gets to be such a giant ensemble cast like Hey Arnold was, because there's, I don't know how many, there's a lot. And so you kind of, I think about what the character needs to accomplish. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to have like a really smart character, like a sort of a brainiac who thinks up the solution, or if you're going to have a kind of an anarchist character who's going to tear it all down, or if you're going to have a nihilist who believes in nothing and so on, none of those describe me, and so you just kind of think about the job they're going to have to do, and try to that. I think it's really fun when you kind of compare, like what I was talking about with just simple design, where one's tall and thin and one's short and wide. It's the same thing with like one's in the yin yang of friendships, where one's going to be really bossy and one's going to be submissive, or one is clearly the wingman who sits there on the side and kind of helps set up the other one to accomplish more, I don't know, kind of forthright goals where they're going straight ahead. And so it's great too, because this is the way, these friendships that I'm describing, we all should have such friendships, it'd be wonderful to have friends like that. So you get to make up stuff that goes beyond reality. You're writing stuff that's way more extreme, because you're trying to hold people's attention for half an hour. Anyway, that's kind of I hope that answered the question.
Oh yeah, totally. I was gonna agree. It's fun to write jerks, and bullies. Like, you and I are,
pretty
pretty nice guys. So writing jerks is just, nothing like us, but it's just fun. I don't know.
Yeah, like you think about how fun it is to write like abuse.
Yeah.
Like you think about a character who's eloquently abusive. I never talk like that. But it's fun to write like that.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that question. That was from R, just the letter R.
Hi, R.
From Christy. How do you write for characters that have a different ethnic background than you?
Well, that's a great question, and we're really the discussion right now is really caught up in that, because when I made Hey Arnold in the 90s, one of my goals was to mix it up and have a bunch of ethnicities, people from all walks of life and different colors, and I wanted to basically show sort of an idealized urban environment that was sort of reflected my world in LA, because I think one of the great things about LA for people who don't live here is it's a great melting pot. Yeah. Most cities are now, most cities are that way, but it became so. And LA was really kind of a leader of that, where you realize, man, just about half this population is Latino. Latino and Black and Asian and white, and all these people are all, in these neighborhoods together. And that really cool mashup of these different cultures that I thought was really, like the music I was listening to in the mid 90s was that kind of, LA was a real mashup place. So it seemed like it was enough to show that then. And I thought it'd be great if Gerald was black. I would love Arnold to have the where I told you about the tall, skinny. I thought, what if he had a really funny, like, high top fade? You know, that would be funny. It'd be cool. And so that was really what made me make Gerald black in the first place. I thought, well, this would be cool. And yet to write for a black family, you would say, what am I doing writing for a black family? Which nowadays has become quite a bit more so. We cast all black people to play the Johansson family, and mom, dad, sister, brother, and Gerald, they were all black actors. So that's a start. And it kind of even helps you kind of in your authenticity. We would write for Gerald based on the way Jamil is really a super funny character. He brought a lot of that, the way the phrasing and the pacing of the way Gerald says stuff. We would hear him say it a certain way and go, I love that. I'm going to write more of that. So that kind of authenticity was there. But, you know, in terms of trying to write for other ethnicities than my own, nowadays it would be more like, it's like, well, you really should have black people on your staff writing black characters, and so on, Asian people, and so on. And so there's more of a call for real authenticity now than there was in the 90s when I made Hey Arnold. And so it's interesting. It's like in the 90s, we were kind of doing our best just to even be representative of different kinds of ethnicities on the screen, thinking that'd be cool if you were a kid and you saw Gerald and you're like, well, hey, cool, finally a character that looks more like me. And I get a lot of that. People tell me that now. I mean, we did it this summer was the summer of Black Lives Matter. And you know, every creative person was like, hey man, where do you stand on that? What do you have to say about that? You know, not just to kind of sit on the sidelines, but to say how you feel. And so, you know, in the 1st of June was when that stuff really got where it is. And I did that Black Lives Matter thing where people had like a couple of weeks to make a donation to some of the ACLU and some of the Black Lives Matter charities. And then they send us the receipt, and then I would send them a digital image of my Arnold and Gerald Black Lives Matter picture, and autograph it to them. And if that was a certain amount of money, I would draw their favorite character in the thing. But it was just basically me going, yeah, of course Black Lives Matter, and so I should do something about it too. But we are in a different time now. This is a time where people, it's not enough to simply have even that kind of representation on the screen. You need to recognize that mostly white people got to make cartoons in the first place. How can you mix it up, bring in people, all kinds of different colors and obviously all kinds of every gender, and mix it up in a way where it's almost not enough just to say, oh, here, like my show's got a black character or a Latino character. You need to go bring in the black writers and so on. So it obviously that's really ongoing, and it's more of a challenge now because it has to be more authentic than it ever was before. I think the world has really changed. I don't think it's the same world as when I started making cartoons at all. And also, you know, you've been in the business long enough to know, Nico, that the whole business changes every 5 years anyway. It's always, we're always faced with a new challenge because, hey man, it's all digital now, or we aren't shooting on film anymore, or things constantly change, and it's up to us to try to change with it.
Yeah. There's ups and downs and twists and turns all over the place, but yeah. Thank you for that. All right, from LJ, do you consider Hey Arnold as edutainment? Throughout the show, I, along with others, learned so much about friendship, dealing with family members, and many more morals through that animated slice of life show. So do you consider Hey Arnold edutainment?
I would consider it edutainment, but that sounds somehow derogatory. I mean, I can tell you this. I have spent the last 12 years working for PBS in one form or another on my shows, Dinosaur Train and Ready, Jet, Go. And also when I started at Henson, I even worked on another show for those guys. So I definitely have had plenty of experience now making educational TV, because PBS's goal for that younger set, 2 to 6, basically, that group, they really want to educate. I mean, they even, it's their mission to reach like every corner of the country, people who maybe can't afford to have even a preschool, and they need to be somehow made ready for kindergarten, learning basic language stuff and science and all the things that STEM represents. And so I've been doing educational TV now for the last 12 years, and it's different from Hey Arnold. And it's cool. I believe me, I'm very happy that people say to me, wow, I learned so much from Hey Arnold, or that Arnold had a kind of a moral code that these are things that when I was young, that kind of gave me ideas about how to be. That's really cool. But I would say it was not created to be, oh, that's so good. Look at that, everybody.
Sorry.
No, not at all. It's so cool that Arnold didn't have to. And so we simply did it. And believe me, none of the execs at Nickelodeon were saying to me, hey, Craig, there's not enough meaning to these episodes. It's not moral enough. Or I'm not getting a kind of a warm fuzzy at the end. They didn't care about that at all, man. They wanted these things to be funny. Yeah. And I found myself telling these stories that were kind of dramas. We used to say, we joked, the writers and I would say, it's kind of like more like a after school special than say Ren and Stimpy, or, I mean, our show is so much more like, slice of life, real kid adventures. But that's just what we were doing. That was our wheelhouse. That's what we were comfortable doing, telling stories about the kind of the melancholy and the sadness of childhood, and like disappointment as a kind of a secret theme that we would never tell our bosses. Oh yeah, it's about disappointment. They would not think that was cool. They would not be like, oh good, disappointment, tell me more. They would be like, what the hell, man? How come this isn't funny? So we were basically always trying to make it funny. And we turns out that it had all these kind of interesting moral lessons, and that would be just, I think the reason that it kind of came out that way was that we were trying to make it a story that was well told. So when you got to the end of the episode, it had gone through an arc, something had been figured out or learned. And then at the very end, like if you look at one of our very first ones, Eugene's bike, Arnold accidentally destroys Eugene's bike through no fault of his own. Now Eugene's bike is destroyed. He tries to do something to make it right. He rebuilds the bike better than ever, but he forgets to connect the brake cable, and Eugene goes, I don't know, down a sewer hole or something, and now he's in the hospital in traction, and Arnold's like, oh my God, everything I do to Eugene is just worse than before. So then he resolves when he gets out of the hospital to give him like his best day ever, and they go and do a bunch of things. They go to a ball game, and he gets hit by a homer in the head, and then he's got a big bandage on, and then he tries to eat a hot dog and nearly chokes to death, and Arnold Heimlichs him, and the bit of hot dog bounces off a sign and pokes him in the eye. Now he's got an eye patch. It just gets worse and worse. And at the very end, Eugene tells him, Arnold says, hey, I'm really sorry. I really meant to give you a great day, and it was a disaster. And Eugene goes, no, nobody else ever cared this much ever. So it's very sweet. And then he says, I can't thank you enough. And he gets on the bus, and the door shuts on his hand, and he's like, and he drives off into the dark, and Arnold's like, and walks off into the sunset. So the point of that is, you're trying to make it so that you make things better, but only a tiny, tiny bit. And tomorrow, even that'll probably be washed away, and Harold's still going to want to beat you up. Or, you can't make it that Arnold fixes the universe in every episode and then everything's great. Yeah. You've got to make it so Arnold tries and tries, and he just moves the ball down the field a little bit, and the world is not, it's only a little bit better. And so we were always trying to make that, we called that the undercut, like that we'd undercut the ending. And, my point being, we're trying to make it about something, but we're not saying that anybody's really fixing anything. It's still a series about disappointment, and maybe just giving kids those tools. Like, how do you cope with when you just had the world's shittiest day? And so I'm glad people see it that way, but believe me, there was no push from the network to be that way. That was just organically what came out of our just trying to have a story be well told.
Gotcha. Huh. That's why you gotta love Arnold. He'll, even if it's not successful by the end of the day, it's just that he tries, and he's always trying to do the right thing.
He tries.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really tries. And the thing that makes him lovable is that he tries and fails. If you really if it always worked, you'd be like, ugh.
Sure. Yeah.
Mug little bastard. So
Yeah.
it's like he is more likable because he can't fix anything.
Yeah.
He just tries.
I'm sorry if it's Ellie or Eli. Their question is, what were your biggest changes in production when you came back for the Jungle movie?
Oh, that's a cool question. Well, things had really changed. If you think about when we started Hey Arnold, production started in 95 for the show to come out in 96. And in those days, we were shooting hand-drawn animation that was Xeroxed onto plastic cells.
Yeah.
Painted on the back with cell vinyl, and then on a background that was made out of watercolor and Prismacolor colored pencils on illustration paper. And that was the way we did the show. Every cell was laid down under one of those, on an animation stand, shot by a camera, 35 millimeter film. And then when it came back, we would get the film transferred to video so we could then digitally edit it on an Avid. So we were already kind of into the world of digital. Rugrats, by the way, in 1990, that was cut on a flatbed 35 millimeter animation editing table. Picture that.
Yeah, with the slicer
table with film. Yeah,
cutting,
and then there was time
physically cutting.
Trying to like we'd look at animation from overseas is often kind of mushy. Like you get your animation back and you're like everything's kind of moving like that. There's not like snap. It's like not starting fast and getting big in the middle and then getting small again. Great animation has those kind of squash and stretchy. Yeah. And so you were always trying to make it better. You get your film back on Rugrats and go, man, I sure wish we zoomed into that thing instead of just like, going in.
Yeah.
And so you had to literally take the film with a splicer, cut the film, take a few frames out, tape it together, and tighten up your zoom that way. So I've seen it from way back in the, Mickey Mouse era, editing style, all the way to now. And so when we came back to make the Jungle movie in 2015, 16, we were writing it. In 2017, we finished it and put it out. Well, for one thing, everything was high def now.
Yeah.
9:16 format that we're looking at in this picture of you, Nico, looks like 9:16.
HD widescreen.
Yeah. And we had been 3:4 when we were making Arnold in the first place. And we weren't on film anymore. We weren't on cell anymore. Everything was digital. But we had begun to make the all digital transition, like the back half of the original order of Arnold. But it had gone through a lot of changes and it had really improved. And everybody was drawing now. Some people still like to do original pencils and then scan it, maybe get it into the digital realm, into Photoshop, and then work on it from there on your Cintiq. But basically, everybody was boarding Hey Arnold on a Cintiq. So what a difference that was. The original boarding days of Hey Arnold were you'd have two guys in an office or two women in an office, but they were sitting in there with their Tombow pencils and their paper and they were flipping stuff. And some people like Dan Povenmire, he was kind of from the Rocco school where they like to do everything on Post-its and just keep putting Post-its up on the what was it, like 11:17 or something? I forget the format of the original storyboard sheet. And they might just be putting 3 Post-its across. But, everybody was still drawing on paper with pencils. And I would say, I'm still a fan of that. I still like to fill sketchbooks up just for that very reason that I love to have the pencil in your hand or the pen in your hand and draw directly and do that kind of straight ahead drawing and not be so I don't know, not so picky. And then at some point though, it's going to go digital. And so we just embraced that. We said, what's cool about this? What do we really like about the new techniques? And certainly it was an efficient way to work. I felt like the animation movie. Yeah, we worked with the same studio just out of sheer, we loved our friends at Seiram that did the last seasons of Hey Arnold, and they're in Seoul, Korea. And so we went back to Seiram. Stu and Rami and I got to go to Seoul for a week and basically show them the animatic and pitch them the whole thing and talk about what we wanted it to be. That was really cool for me. It was cool to go back there and see some old friends. And obviously there was a new generation of artists working on it. And I pitched them the whole animatic and told them why I had done it. And like, this is what I think it needs to be. These are the big scenes. And believe me, man, when we showed it in the big, we had a big conference room with like a big wall-sized TV, and the whole crew watched it. When, like, say in the Jungle movie, there's a dark place like halfway through the picture, or maybe a little bit later than halfway, where it's meant to be, Helga's meant to hit bottom, and she takes her precious locket out. Yeah. And she opens it and gets out the picture and tears it into bits and throws it overboard and throws the locket after it. And that's meant to make you go like, what?
Yeah.
And I could hear some of the younger artists in the back of the room go like, good. And they're like, talking in Korean. And I'm like, good, But there's also a moment, I mean, I think it's okay for me to do spoilers about the Jungle movie because it actually is. It's been around for 3 years. But there's also a moment at the end where Arnold is meant to wake up and wonder, was the whole thing a dream? And he runs downstairs, and we purposefully redid the opening scene when he ran downstairs at the start of the movie, word for word for a while, so you can see his heart break.
Yeah.
And that was another moment where kids in the back of the room were like, huh? No. And they were pissed. Please. And that was on purpose, man. And so I don't know I forget what the question even was, but
I really
that was what we did when we got to go back and do it again. It was like, man, I get to go back to Korea, and the difference will be these are going to be people who maybe even kind of grew up with the show and are working on it, and there will be hopefully a deeper understanding and a deeper love for it than ever before. Yeah. So I think they did a great job.
I love the movie. I hate to brag to everyone, but we got to see it on the Arnold Jungle movie on the theater screen at the Inside Nick, and I remember a lot of the audience, like you said, gasping at particularly the locket part. I was with you at that screening, I think. So,
good.
I remember
that, Nico.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all got a little squishy Arnold head, bobblehead.
Yeah.
Presents. That was really cool.
Yeah.
All right. What steps do you follow when creating a character?
Well, I do look, I mean, like a main character, I do try to find a kind of an avatar for myself in a main character.
Okay.
If you look at, I've been able to make 3 TV series, Hey Arnold, Dinosaur Train, and Ready, Jet, Go. Hey Arnold's about a kid who is supposed to be a kind of a Charlie Brown like everyman, but I found that it really helped me when I created him to have him reflect the way I felt about childhood.
Yeah.
So I looked for him to become an avatar for me, where I could put words in his mouth or about the way I kind of things I wished I'd have said when I was a kid. You know what I mean? So much more, we have so much more control over the fates of these made up characters than our own messy real life. That it gave me a lot of, it really helped me get up and come in every day and work on it, knowing that I had this sort of avatar for my own feelings about life. Then I got to make Dinosaur Train after that, which was really based on an idea that I got when my own son was 3, and I watched him playing with dinosaurs and putting them on trains and saying, I could hear him in his play, like, now the dinosaur family's doing go on the train. And I was like, damn, man, that's a great show. So, but Dinosaur Train is about a nest full of pteranodons, which are, you know, like pterodactyls. They're like those big green, like long, crazy, pointy, you know, hatchet-faced, you know, dinosaur birds that you know, they lived in nests and laid eggs. And in the opening title sequence, you see the eggs hatch, and it's three little pteranodons and one T-Rex, and they're green and he's orange. And his egg cracks open. He goes, "What am I doing in a pteranodon nest?" And so that was my character, Buddy the T-Rex, the little kid T-Rex who's going to someday be too big to fit in the nest, and will be this giant, you know, monster of a T-Rex. And you know, the thing I loved about the Buddy character was that he, just like Arnold, he was always in the middle of everything. He was super optimistic, and you kind of couldn't get him down. And he was like an even more cheerful version of Arnold. And so once again, I had a kind of an avatar. This Buddy character could represent my feelings about being a little brother to, I had a couple older sisters when I was little, and we'd go on car trips. And I said, it'll be just like that, except it'll be 3 older, you know, sibs and the me character going on adventures. And so once again, I really realized that, man, here's another kind of Arnold-y character. And then the third series that I got to make is Ready, Jet, Go, which was also for PBS and about space astronomy curriculum. And Jet is an alien kid who the family are intergalactic travel writers who landed on Earth, and their rocket ship turned into a suburban house that blended in with the other houses on the block. And by some kind of weird twist, nobody seems to even notice except one neighbor kid who's like, "Hey, what's with the new house?" You know. And the character of Jet, totally enthusiastic. You can't get him down. He's ready for anything. He basically is an avatar for what I wish I was like as a kid. You know, when I think about Jet and his like unflagging enthusiasm for things and his willingness to believe in anything and kind of be friends with anyone, I was like, yeah, Jet's even kind of closer to my true avatar than even Arnold or Buddy. But I think that's what I'm doing. I'm always trying to make a character who will I can invest in. These are things that I believe. How can I have a character kind of act that stuff out? So the rest of them, I mean, I always start from there, and then the rest of the characters, you know, just what else do your stories need?
Yeah. Would you say that even not just the main character, but even side characters, would you always put a little bit of yourself in each character?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, I'm kind of like, there's a sort of a kind of an overall philosophy of how you see the world that I think just you try to put into all the characters and into the setting and the situation. And I would say too, from my point of view, and probably anybody else who's had the chance to make animation for TV, the thing that we love about being animators and about creating these shows is that it really is truly world building in a way that if you want, let's say I want to make a live action cop show set in Brooklyn, and I'm like, it'll be like this and this and this. You still kind of got like the real Brooklyn, and you got real cops, and you got like the way people are and the way they look and the sounds that you hear. You expect it to sound like, you know, like Brooklyn or like a cop station, or like a car's got to sound like a car. We're in a world where, yeah, I mean, Arnold's world was very urban, and it's meant to evoke what it's like to be in a city, but we're making that stuff up from scratch, man. We created a town that reminded me of Seattle and Portland and Brooklyn, and it kind of mashed them together. And when I would go to the sound guys and talk about the world we were trying to create, I'd say, I want those kind of backgrounds, like Arnold wakes up and he hears car buys, you know, and we had a thing called a scooter by, like, and like a little scooter would go by. That wakes him up at the end of. We thought that would be so cool if Arnold woke up to a scooter by. Next time you watch the Jungle movie, when he wakes up at the end, a scooter goes by and Arnold's eyes pop open. And I was like, that would be great, because it's like, oh, Arnold wakes up, he's back on Vine Street where he lives in his town. And so I really love that about animation. We get to make something up that has never been and it might remind you of something, but it's completely for us to invent the whole world. And so we're super lucky, you know. I feel like live action people are kind of in a rut, you know.
There are so many questions. I feel so bad. I'm having a great time just taking our time answering these. We haven't hit 10 questions yet. We have 30 almost in, so we'll try to.
I'll make them shorter.
I'll try to do a little lightning round here. Okay. From Eric, what are some good tips on how to make your characters visually look distinct from one another? I have a project where the protagonists are 3 12-year-old girls, and I wonder about their faces and proportions being too similar. How can I make them look distinct while keeping them visually coherent?
Yeah, well, you know, there are definitely styles. I mean, you know, when you look at the stuff that's on TV, often even at like a whole channel will kind of have a house style. And once in a while, some really cool design comes along, kind of shakes that shit up. Look at Penn and Adventure Time. Yeah. I felt like Adventure Time was one of those kind of seminal, you know, TV series that kind of blew open that look. And it was great too. Penn's stuff made me think of anime. You know, you could kind of feel like maybe some of the influences that he had, and yet it really was his own too. And when you look at that world, you think, look, I would say maybe check out as an answer to that, maybe look at your favorite series, you know, favorite cartoon series, and hopefully coming from kind of different places and different genres and stuff, and see why something that's really visually strong works. And I would say that would be it. There's probably a kind of a consistency to it. I was trying on the Arnold stuff, especially in the early work, you know, the claymation stuff. When you were talking about that at the beginning, Nico, that it's like, I want to have like geometric shapes, heads that are kind of basically triangles, and torsos that are basically triangles, and like little funny kind of skin. We started out, they had all these kind of spaghetti arms and legs when we started, and it got more anatomical as it went. But I thought that was because, you know, I think about Tuck Tucker was one of my main directors and board guys, and kind of set the tone a lot. His Helgas were really definitive when we started the series. And so the input from these really talented artists who were drawing, and everybody was going as fast as they could, and, you know, just boarding stories as fast as they could, we would look at it and go, you know, for Arnold to work, we kind of need to kind of flatten the bottom of his head now, make it more of a taco head than like a perfectly symmetrical football head, and so on. And we were just like, it's a little nicer that way. I kind of like the way it looks now. And we ended up giving him more anatomy just for he's got such a complicated head. It's kind of hard to picture him taking his hat off the top of his head if his arms are too small. So you kind of stretch things. You kind of work on giving him a little more anatomy as you go, as you're trying to go through these really expressive poses. And same thing with Helga and all the characters. So they became more and more real, but they started with my aesthetic was I was coming off of Penny and working in clay and that sort of 2.5D aesthetic, where at that point, when I was doing that early design, really fundamental geometric shapes were where I was coming from. So I don't know how consistent it was. I tried to make it consistent, but it just kept growing and growing. And, you know, finally we had a crew of 50 people, and, you know, a lot of people drawing and kind of putting in their own influence. And, you know, Clint Bond was our character designer. Jerry Richardson was a character designer in those early days. Their contributions were really big too. And so, you know, a bunch of people get involved. They all pile in, and they all make their contribution. And you just try to, I think it's up to the show creator to go, well, I got to reject the things that don't fit in this box. I gotta somehow give everybody some decent direction so they know what the rules of this universe are. And you know, I think that I would say, study the cartoons that you really love, and try to take a tip from that. You know, you look at classic stuff, the Warners and the Disney, the early classic cartoons, they had wonderful volume, you know, they turned beautifully because they were really well constructed. And you look at a modern cartoon, things are different now. And we're much more likely to make things that are probably more flat for various reasons, you know, for aesthetic reasons and our influences. Like anime was anime came and really kind of influenced the cartoons we're watching now. By the way, I hope everybody has seen Pen's new cartoon he made for Netflix,
Midnight Gospel. Yeah.
I seriously love that cartoon. Mike Mayfield, by the way, is one of the people who really involved with the look of the show. And man, those guys are hot. That shit is good. It's a super fun cartoon. And it's fun to see where Pen's head is at, you know, see where he's gone in his post
adventure type. Yeah. Cool. Let's see, from Alexander.
Talk about some cool characters.
Oh, anyway, yeah, absolutely. From Alexander, were the backgrounds in Hey Arnold done with colored pencil? If not, was there a technique that made it look like they were in colored pencil?
Wow, it's a great question, because the part of the answer to that is, what did we do when we went digital? And we're all digital now, because yes, the original, when I started Hey Arnold, I said, what if we paint it? But I really love Prismacolors. And so let's paint it on a watercolor, you know, like a board, or on you know, heavy watercolor paper. And then with Prismacolors, we'll give it that raggedy line that it has. If you look at those early first and second season skies, they're really rough. You know, they've got a heavy pencil on top of the color, and it's my favorite look. And so when we started up again in 2016, 2015, when we were Jerry Richardson came back. He'd been an early character designer, and he was the art director of the reboot, the Jungle movie. And I said, Jerry, I know we're all digital now. How can we make that work that way? And so he worked up his own kind of template for how to do it, where they'd kind of undercolor, and then on top, he designed some good digital brushes that had, you know, that sort of scratchy pencil point. And he made a bunch of examples, and he'd show me, he's like, okay, is this too rough? Like, he showed me, he did PS 118, and he did a bunch of them, and he's like, here it is, super rough. Here it is, a little bit more refined. Here it is, really painterly. And then we'd kind of pick our look. But yeah, if you want to know how to draw the way I like to draw, and I still like to draw, like this is still, oops, wrong one. Where I put it.
Another reason for everyone to follow Craig's Instagram is all the awesome drawings.
This is still like water. There's a tiny bit of watercolor, but mostly it's Prismacolor on ink pen. I'm now using, my favorite is Derwent. By the way, the pencil that we all use was invented in England, and Derwent was the first company that made those pencils. Just saying. They found this veins of graphite, you know, in the earth in this part of England. And they dug it up, and there were these big chunks of carbon, you know, graphite. And they realized that if you rubbed it on paper, it made a mark. And they're like, ah, cool. And then some brainiac realized that you could make little leads and put them between cedar halves and make a pencil. But I mean, think about that. They invented a pencil. So anyway, Derwent is still making really good ink pens, and I love them. I love to use gray and sepia and black ink pens for my ink work. And I just do that's strictly for fun too. I'm not, although I do try to turn my sketches into, you know, eventually I scan them and get them into Photoshop and try to, you know, create shows from these ideas. But you know, just for fun, I draw with Prismacolor to this day.
That's a good name for a character too. Somebody called Derwent. Yeah. From Eric, as you've written and created so many characters, are there any revelations you've made or lessons you've learned which take characters from good to great?
So things that I've learned while doing them. Well, I would say, if you think about some of those early, you're like, you want to make Helga likable. You know, when you start, Helga's just mean.
Yeah.
Okay, she's just mean. People aren't going to like her. She's a bully. She's mean. She pushes everybody around. What's her problem? And then you figure out, like, okay, what do I need from Helga? She loves Arnold secretly, That's fun. Okay, that's funny. She's doing all this because she really loves him. Oh my God, that'll be cool. She gets all flowery and monologues to her little locket.
Yeah,
that's funny. And then turns out she's finished her giant monologue, and Brainy was right behind her.
Yeah,
like magically showing up every time she does one of those monologues and breathing, mouth breathing on her from behind, and then she'll sock him, and that'll be funny. And then you're like, okay. But where's this all going? And then you go, here's the deal. Because believe me, when I started Hey Arnold, talk about having to defend what a character was. When I started Hey Arnold, I would get our first stories, just what was happening. I would get notes from the execs where they're like, all right, who is Arnold? Like,
okay.
Oh yeah, because Helga, weirdly, all the people that ran Nickelodeon, it was, by the way, the company was run mostly by women.
Yeah.
They loved Helga. They were all like,
okay.
Jerry Laybourne, who was the president of Nickelodeon when the show got greenlit, Jerry Laybourne said, "Oh, you know what? I was Helga." You told me that we went to lunch, and she's like, "I was Helga." So that's a cool character. And so, no matter what she did, man, no matter how mean or how weird, stocky, like bubble gum head shrine in the closet, no matter how weird, they were like, "Yeah, more of that Helga."
Did you see, by the way, that Arnold shrine they have at Nickelodeon?
Oh yeah, the one that's
they made like a real
was that
closet?
That was the one that they had at the Comic-Con in 2016.
Okay, they brought it to the studio. That's what happened.
Yeah, wow. So that's cool. At the studio too.
I love that.
I'm glad to hear it. I know that they made the stoop from another con.
Yeah,
they brought the stoop. So wow, man, all the Arnold.
Yes, and then the whatever floor you guys did.
Yeah,
the Jungle movie we were on the stoop is there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, God, I forget where I was. Oh yeah, okay. So the network was like, well, who is Arnold? I mean, I don't get. He was. If you think about it, Arnold is actually just kind of a nice, sensitive kid, right? He's not like, he's not like Bugs Bunny. He's not like out there making shit blow up. Arnold is much more thoughtful, kind of Zen little Buddha. And I said, look, here's the deal. Arnold will be this super Zen character that's all chill and good to people, and everybody around him will be nuts. And so I said, just watch, this way we can have all these really funny characters that are doing things, and Arnold's kind of trying to fix it or kind of to help them. It
reminds me of Kermit from the Muppets.
Yeah.
Like he's, the glue, and everyone around him is nuts.
I think that's a really good comparison. And I said, look, here's what we'll do. Helga, in her monologues, will obsess about Arnold, and she'll love him, and she'll constantly praise him and make him sound like he's the greatest thing ever. And I said, this is how it'll work. He won't have to say he's cool at all. He won't have to act cool or be cool or any of that crap we hate and think is phony. If we watch that in a cartoon character, we're like, ugh, like this guy telling me he's cool. And then Helga will, in her monologues to her little locket, and all of her secrets and stuff, she will tell us over and over how awesome he is, and it'll work. People will go, well, he must be cool. Helga says he's cool all the time.
Yeah.
And believe me, when I was pitching that, it was like not going over so hot. I would try to explain how it was going to be, and I'd be like, man, they're not buying this. And we just hung in there and got a bunch of shows done. And then when you saw them and they were finished, they were like, oh, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? Like you have to, so much of this stuff becomes revealed because you made 10 of them. Yeah. And you could go, well, if you want to know who Helga is, watch all these 10 episodes and that'll tell you who Helga is.
Yeah.
And that goes for everyone. Season 2 starts and you get a new artist. You go, watch season 1, man. This is what the show is. And so, I mean, obviously, if you made the first 10 and you hated them all and they all came out bad, that'd be one thing. But you're hoping for a good outcome where it comes out okay. And then I would just say now in 2020, to have somebody who's 30 years old and grew up on the show describe what Helga means to them. And I go, oh my God, that is exactly what we were trying to do.
Good.
We made her say those things because this was the effect we wanted it to have. And so, yeah, people who grew up on Hey Arnold think he's a really cool character. Not because he ever said, I'm a cool character, but because somebody else did. Mm-hmm. So that's a very interesting thing. That's something that secondary and kind of more outside characters can do. They can reveal who the main character is.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, that was a lucky break.
It's pretty cool.
When we made it, I was not getting this feedback. I had no idea that 20 years later I'd be able to read something that somebody wrote and go, God, it's great. That really worked. Landed that.
Right. It's great to know that like it touched them the exact way you wanted to.
Right. We're just sort of shooting in the dark, and then we just hope that it's going to be a good result.
Here's something I'm really interested in too. A question from Rebecca. Aside from Peanuts and jazz, what other inspirations are there for the characters of Hey Arnold?
Oh, that's great. Well. I mean, that's true. As a kid, I saw Charlie Brown Christmas when I was like Charlie Brown's age.
Yeah.
And I thought, cartoons don't just have to be Bugs Bunny cartoons. They can be really melancholy and kind of sad and beautiful and weird, and that's what Charles Schulz brought. And he brought the children who talk like adults too.
Yeah.
And basically have almost adult problems, but they're little and it's fun.
Yeah.
And so I was really influenced by that. I really did love all the Warner cartoons. I still to this day, a classic Warner cartoon is still about the happiest 8 minutes you can spend.
Oh yeah, me too.
I was very influenced by fine art as well. I wanted to do an urban landscape that evoked some kind of passed over. I wanted Arnold's neighborhood to seem like a neighborhood that was kind of forgotten, built 100 years ago out of brick and wood, and this building styles would be from some other era. And Edward Hopper, the American painter, was a favorite of mine because he painted that kind of melancholy and lonely urban world over and over again, and really beautifully. And his
the name, because I want to look him up.
Edward Hopper.
Edward Hopper. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And he, and I remember when we were first starting, Jamie Mitchell was our supervising producer on the first season. And Jamie and I were talking about what we were going to do art direction wise to kind of sell that idea. And we looked at the work of early Disney artists. I'm thinking about Bill Peet, maybe, was somebody that both of us liked. And the Ashcan school of painters who were sort of also turn of the century painters in New York. And that really, I think, influenced Disney painters who did those early features. And we talked about, look at how you see this landscape of buildings, and look how in every window is maybe a different, one's got a yellow light and one's got a curtain over it. That window's broken, and look, in this one, maybe you see the part of somebody doing something. And so it's let's make it so you treat every building like it's a different building, and you treat every window like there might be something interesting in there.
Yeah.
And that aesthetic that was going to be urban, I knew if we did that, and also that approach we were doing too, where we were going to paint the backgrounds and do the Prismacolor colored pencil on top of it. I thought, yeah, we can come up with a whole palette that isn't like anything else that's going on. And even that was our way to be different from Charlie Brown, because Schultz liked to do no buildings, and no adults. And if anything, he was just out on the grass somewhere, or he was in a living room where you might see part of a sofa. And so Schultz went for background minimalism, and I thought, well, that's cool. We can go from background maximalism, and that'll make it seem like its own thing. Yeah. So those were, I really love. I really was glad that I'd gotten a basic fine art education. I went to art school and took my third year abroad and went to Italy and looked at Italian architecture and painting, and got my mind blown. And when I came back, in fact, when I came back from my third year, I didn't go back to the art school. I basically was a dropout, just trying to make money again. And I ended up finishing at Evergreen in Washington, because everybody in the Northwest knew that Evergreen was like a magnet for every creative weirdo in the Northwest. It was, people would go to Evergreen because it didn't have grades, and you could go to the media library and check out a camera and nobody would tell you what to do, and you could just go shoot, So
Wow.
I ended up finishing at Evergreen just for the freedom of that. And I thought, well, was that year I spent in Italy, was that just like a waste? But the truth is, it's not.
Yeah.
You got your mind blown. You saw things that you'd never see, and you ran out of money, and you hitchhiked, and you had adventures, and those are all things that really influenced my personality. I felt super shaped by that. My God, by the time I got back to Washington State from my year in Italy, I was just like, wow, who am I? What's next? I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I think that is really good for your personality, even if it's not like a class that you're taking that's going to teach you to be an animator. It's much more like I came at animation from trying a bunch of other stuff. And, my introduction to the world of making animation for TV couldn't have been weirder, coming to LA to make Pee-wee's Playhouse, make claymation penny cartoons for Pee-wee's Playhouse. And then I stumbled into the Klasky Chupo gang to do Rugrats at the beginning of the Nicktoons. That was pretty weird too. We were all a bunch of outsiders and underexperienced, goofballs. So it wasn't like I didn't just do this straight up. I'm going to go to Cal Arts and, graduate and go work at a big studio. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just came to LA to do Pee-wee and just stuck around.
Well, no experience is bad experience. Use everything to.
I do. I really
and this
feel
is
that.
also going to the person who asked the question too. Use everything in your life
It's
towards.
true. You'll never know. It's all good.
Yeah. Let's see here. And I know you have to. Did you say?
Well, yeah, I'm good till like 10 to 6.
10 till. Okay, we have 10 minutes. Let's see if we can do like a lightning round here. Are there storylines from some side characters in Arnold that you wanted to pursue during the show's run, but didn't have time or didn't make it to any episodes?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, that was part of the reason that I was so sure that we would just go right on to do another season of the show, because we'd gotten everybody together. And so many stories were sparked by us just talking about the characters again, and things I wanted to do. The relationships between Arnold and Helga, Gerald and Phoebe, and there were other hookups in the series too. Harold ended up, you thought maybe he'd be with Big Patty, and so on. And figuring that we had spent a bunch of episodes with all of them. I wanted to know what's going to happen to Curly. Some characters I never even did an episode with. Like I never did a Brainy episode, even though I voiced Brainy, and so I kind of identify with him as this sort of magical character who magically appears, whenever Helga, needs him to.
Brittany is asking if you can do a little Brainy for us.
Oh, you want to hear some Brainy? Okay, you ready? Here goes. And scene.
And scene. You're hired.
And so, yeah, like, what's his deal? And so on. Arnold's parents, they're finally back. Oh my God.
Yeah.
There's
a lot more stories to tell.
Yeah. His grandma and grandpa, we were thinking mom and dad come to run the boarding house now, and maybe they get an idea to turn it into something else. And they're trying to get grandma and grandpa to retire, and grandma and grandpa fighting back and won't retire. Tension between them all, like too many cops now, like Arnold's had this wonderful unsupervised childhood, and all of a sudden his parents are there, and so on. And I thought it could be a little bit kind of damaged goods from having slept for 10 years. Maybe they're not quite right in the head, and so on. I love that. Some fan did a bunch of, a lot of fans over the years have done the characters grown up or as teenagers or as 20-somethings. And some fan did a storyline where Sid and Stinky start a rockabilly band. And I was just always like, eventually Sid and Stinky got to start their rockabilly band, and so on. And I wanted to do more urban legends. Gerald's going to keep doing urban legends, and so on. So I wanted to bring people back. And anyway, those are some of the things I wanted to do.
Well, there's at least enough ideas for, of course, way more than a season 6. Man.
It's right itself.
Thomas is asking really quick, where did the design for the treehouse come from? It was always so cool, and I wanted to hang out in it so badly.
Yeah, here's a shout out to my background designers. It's a kind of an unsung role in cartoon shows, but Hey Arnold, we had superstars because it's so specific, kind of realistic, kind of fantastical, but like really rooted in like you can believe it's in a city. And I don't know, Brian Mark was my layout supervisor. He led that team, but we had Hugh McDonald, Cesar Martinez, Steve Lotwaite, God, Charles Garcia. We had a bunch of people drawing those backgrounds, and they were outstanding. Steve Lotwaite loved to do like a crazy shot where you're like a down shot and you're looking. Yeah. You'd love to kind of put the camera in some really crazy place. Cesar Martinez would do the best. He did those kind of great 60s kind of Detroit iron, like classic cars that were parked everywhere. If you see like a cool old car parked on the street, Caesar probably drew it. Hugh McDonald, he loved to just do like just an infinity of brick buildings going into the horizon with this, and all that stuff I was talking about, where every window's a little different, and that team I had was fantastic. Brian Mark, who supervised everybody, had grown up in the same part of North Seattle that I did, and so when I told him, I said, "Hey, look, that kind of that look in downtown Seattle, it's like this," and he knew what I was talking about, and he also knew it was a made up place because the buildings were like New York in that they had water towers and fire escapes that Seattle's not really like that, and stoops, the stoops are super important in Hey Arnold, and Seattle doesn't really have that. So it was a made up place, and you could just feel it. Everybody got caught up in it and had a shared enthusiasm for it that way beyond me. I always felt that way. There were always better people painted better than I could paint or drew better than I could draw. And it's like a win-win because I get all the credit now as if it all came out of my head. And, it doesn't. It's like a collaboration between a ton of people. So anyway.
Great. Thank you so much for all these answers, by the way. They're all just like, I could just listen all day, honestly. From Dylan, you've been talking about how characters develop as the show progresses, but how defined should your characters be in your initial pitch?
Well, that's another great question, because you are trying to pretend in your initial pitch that you've got all these answers, but I didn't have any. I was pulling stuff out of my ass for the whole way. And you do get into some trouble where you kind of paint yourself in a corner where you go, man, I wish I'd have thought of this when I set out. Why did I set this up? Now I got to do this. And especially a show like Hey Arnold that is about reality, and it's got about the past and the present and the future, and things are supposed to make sense. Unlike, say, Ren and Stimpy, where today they work in they're fire dogs. Tomorrow they're in a suburban house with a mom and a dad. Now they're homeless and they live on the street. That was the aesthetic of Ren and Stimpy. Every cartoon was going to be different. My cartoon was like, no, man, he lives in Hillwood and he lives on Vine Street in a 2-story, building that's got this floor plan. It's kind of magical. It's like magical realism. It's kind of magical, and it's also very rooted in reality. And so, damn it, ask me the question again, because I forgot.
How defined should a character be in your initial pitch?
How figured out is it when you start? You're trying to have it figured out, and you're trying to have answers to every question that they're going to ask you when you pitch the show.
Yeah, and that's what they like, is they want to
be like, oh, I don't know. You have to
don't ever answer. I don't know.
It's going to be this. You have to make it feel.
I think you need to develop this a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, when I think about Hey Arnold, I had the germ of an idea, and then it just grew. And like the parents, when I started, they said, well, where's his parents? How come he lives with his grandparents? I'm like, oh, they're in Africa. They're filmmakers. They're making documentaries in Africa or something. And they're cool, but they're away, and they've left Arnold with the grandparents. But then 3 seasons went by, and they never even wrote a single postcard. And you're like, well, crap, they must be terrible. And I was like, oh, no, they're not terrible. What'll I do? And so I wrote that Parents' Day episode at the end of season 3, 60 half hours in. And it was really like I'd painted myself in a corner. I'm like, oh my God, they had to go and they flew away and they must have died.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wow, now it's even sadder and worse than when I started. Now we're feeling even worse for Arnold. His parents must be dead. And we went through the rest of the show, and it was only until we got to the movies and developing the movie ideas that we dared to figure out what to do about the missing parents. That was what the journal was about. And I really felt like that's what happens when you don't think ahead and plan ahead, which is where most people are going to be, man. You're just hoping for an order of some shows, man. You haven't figured everything out. You're just like, oh my God, I got 20 half hours to make it. Fantastic. And then you make those. We were 60 in, man, 3 years in. And I finally went, I got to deal with these parents. So, it'd be nice to think ahead. I would recommend it. But the truth is, you're just glad to get to work, and, you're writing as fast, you tap dancing as fast as you can.
Yeah. At the same time, I think it's important to leave some mystery.
Yeah, that's cool too. Like, hey, well, guess what? We don't know.
Yeah. It is 5:50. I know you have to run.
I'll answer 2 more questions.
2 more? Okay. How does location help influence a character? I love that the city in Hey Arnold has as much character as the characters themselves.
Yeah, I think that the city, for me, the city made it possible for these kids to be very near each other, and you figured they all lived close to each other, and you could create a kind of an idealized city where it was pretty benign and pretty safe, and they could go out and, day and night, they could go out and have these adventures. And I just felt like that grungy urban aesthetic was really a cool aesthetic. And I also kind of suspected that a lot of our audience lived in cities and were having similar experiences where they were in a kind of a melting pot with all kinds of different ethnicities and kind of, styles and flavors. And so it was fun. It kind of made like an instantly kind of cool background that it was fun to do. And everyone really they loved that, Jim Lang's music, captured that 90s urban environment really well and inspired the artists. So that's why we did it.
Great. Cool. And I think this is a good last question from, Miro. Did you ever think Hey Arnold would resonate with so many age groups like it does today? I don't think I truly appreciated Hey Arnold until I was older.
I'm glad. Thank you. I'm glad you think it resonates with everybody. I didn't know it would. I mean, I suspected that if we did a show that had these things I'm talking about, that was really about kind of disappointment and the vague sort of melancholy of being a kid and not really having any power and trying to make the best out of a kind of a crappy situation. At its core, and then on top of that, try to be funny and the network's going to need this to be funny. It's jokes, and you come up with characters that are funny. Like Gerald has a style of being funny, Helga has a style of being funny, Stinky and Harold. Everybody kind of has their own way of. Grandma and Grandpa have a way of being funny, so that it's never depressing, hopefully, and never too sad or too fucked up. But that's what I did to try to make it what it was. And I believed it would resonate with kids. I didn't really know. We didn't really have we didn't focus test it or anything like that. It did well. It got a lot of viewing, but I felt partly because Nickelodeon was exploding. When we put the show out, it led off the primetime initiative during the week. Monday and Wednesday, we were on at 8:00. And so it came out swinging, at this new time slot, and they immediately got a lot of viewers, and they went, oh, it's working great. So I was happy that it wasn't like they took a chance on me at Nickelodeon and it bombed. Then you'd feel bad. You'd feel like, no, kids will love it. But if you don't get the ratings that they needed, then they sort of feel like they blew it and lost. So luckily it did get good ratings. So I figured it was working and resonating. But like I said, I didn't really find out until later, years later.
Really?
And kind of after I was done, really, when the internet, the social
Yeah.
media, that stuff kind of took off after Arnold was even finished. And so we're only discovering now kind of the level at which it resonates with people. And that's really nice. It's super nice and flattering. It makes me feel really glad. You know, it makes me feel like, oh, you know, what do you know? It worked.
Yeah,
and, so,
and it seems like it was a lot of the internet and a lot of the fans that brought it back.
Yeah,
Was able to bring it back.
No kidding. There was a huge movement where they were trying to get Nickelodeon's attention and say.
I remember all through the 2000s, it was like, let Hey Arnold, you know, wrap up, or give them a.
And you know, I had made that journal episode be this cliffhanger, and then that was it. That was the last thing we made. And so I felt a little bad, like I'd kind of like I left everybody hanging, and it was just me kind of daring the network to keep going and make more. And I would say I still hope that they call me up one day.
Yeah, I still hope there's
more. Ready to make some more.
We all do. We all hope.
In the meantime, I just keep making cartoons, any kind of cartoon, anything that I can. Obviously, the work that I created myself is more deeply satisfying than working on something else. But I just like to work, and I like to make stuff. And so, it's been a really great run, and I hope to make more stuff, and I hope to make more Hey Arnold. But we'll see. You know, we'll just have to see.
You always make more stuff.
Yeah.
You'll always be making more stuff. Thank you so much, Craig.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Good to see you. And thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Your questions were great.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week. See ya.
Okay. Ciao.